everyone, and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you are new. Today I'm going to be doing my semi-late December wrap-up. I was kind of putting off this video for two reasons. One, because I feel like I'm kind of just over all of the 2020 related videos and I don't want to talk about anything from that year anymore, but I feel like if I don't make this video, then my wrap-ups are going to be incomplete and my brain can't handle that. So I am going to make the video, but another reason I was putting it off was because I actually did reading vlogs throughout the entirety of December, so I've already talked about these books and my thoughts on them so many times. I feel like my videos are getting so redundant at this point, but nevertheless, I'm going to try and make this video kind of quick and just do like rapid reviews of these books and not like linger on any of them too long, but I tend to be a little rambly, so we'll see how that goes. Without further ado, I read 6 books in December, starting with the first one, which is 5 Total Strangers by Natalie D. Richards. In this book, we're following our main character called Mira, and she is a high school art student, and she is flying home for the holidays. This book actually takes place on Christmas Eve, and during her first flight, she sits next to another young girl called Harper, and they end up becoming friends on the flight, and then when they get to the airport, before they can get on their connecting flight, it ends up being canceled due to the bad weather. So Harper rents a car and invites Mira to come with her and some of her friends, and they will drop her off on the way home. But unfortunately, when they get in the car and start driving, not only does the weather get progressively worse, but also some items start to go missing, some strange things start to happen, and Mira realizes that she just got in the car with total strangers that she doesn't know. So this is a YA thriller that unfortunately I didn't like very much. For the beginning and middle of the book, it kept me just interested enough to keep reading just to find out how it would end. But then with most thrillers, the ending really makes or breaks the book, and for this one, definitely did the book in. Not only did I predict the ending, but it was a very rushed ending. Like, it just came out of nowhere. Like, I felt like we didn't get to the ending and there was only like 20 pages of the book left, and then it ended, and the ending wasn't even really that interesting. And also there was like a portion of the book that we just never got an answer to. I just left the book kind of feeling meh about the whole thing. I think I gave it like a 2-star rating, but I can't say that I would recommend it. The next book I read in December was Violet Bent Backwards Over the Grass by Lana Del Rey. This is her poetry collection, as well as kind of a collection of photography, which I think she took herself. I feel like I remember reading that at the beginning of this book, but I can't be 100% sure on that one. I really tried in 2020 to get into poetry. I tried reading like classical poetry like Emily Dickinson and William Shakespeare, and that was not my thing. Then I tried some modern poetry, and you know what? I just don't think poetry is really for me. I always say, besides Dr. Seuss and Tim Burton, I just don't really do poetry now. But I will say I did enjoy this more than any other poetry collection that I've read. I feel like there were maybe, I don't know, 5 poems in here that I did really enjoy, so I ended up giving it 3 stars. Overall, I feel like I always leave a poetry collection just feeling really stupid, because I feel like a lot of them just kind of go over my head. And I also have always said that I just cannot figure out the rhythm of poems. Like, I know that this was something that I studied at some point in like middle school, but I don't remember what any kind of type of poetry is called, and the only way that I know how to read poetry is in the style of like Dr. Seuss or Tim Burton, like I said. Other than that, I can't figure out the rhythm of it. So I just kind of leave poetry feeling really stupid. But like I said, this was definitely the best poetry collection I've read so far, so I'd recommend it, and the photography was nice. I enjoyed it. The next book I picked up in December was The Invention of Hugo Cabre by Brian Selznick. This is a reread for me. I think I've read this like 3 or 4 times now, and I absolutely loved it again, which is no surprise. This is one of my all-time favorite books. If you have never read a Brian Selznick book before, then you won't know that his books are mainly made up of illustrations. So there are some words, but there are a lot of gorgeous illustrations, which are also by Brian Selznick, and that is probably one of the biggest reasons why I love this book so much, is because of the illustrations. It just adds so much to the story, but also the story itself is just absolutely wonderful. It is set in a train station in Paris in, I want to say, like the 20s or something like that, and we're following our main character, Hugo Cabre, who is a young boy that basically lives in the walls of this train station, and he makes sure that all of the clocks in the train station continue to work. And when he was young, his father died in a fire, unfortunately, and his father had found this automaton, which is like a little mechanical man that has a pencil, and when you wind him up, he draws a picture. And his father was trying to fix this automaton, but then he passed before he was able to. So now Hugo is trying to fix it and see if his father left behind a message that this automaton will draw out. And it's just such a lovely story, and I think my favorite thing about this is that even though it is fiction, there is a character in this book that is actually a historical figure, and I love that so much when books like mix fact with fiction. I think it is so cool. So I absolutely love this story, and I cannot recommend it enough, and I'll definitely be reading it so many more times in the future. The next book that I picked up in December was A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. This is a big collection of books by Charles Dickens that I have. The first one in here is A Christmas Carol, which is actually only about 70 pages of this really big book. This was another reread for me. Once again, I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I love the Christmas Carol story. It's just, you know, like one of those classic books. I mean, like, I don't really know what else to say about it except that I love it. It's a staple. I'll probably read it every Christmas from now on. The next book I picked up is another reread, and that is Wonderstruck by Brian Selznick also. So once again, this book is largely made up of pictures. In this book, we're actually following 2 different characters during 2 different timelines. So the first character we follow is a young boy called Ben, and he's born deaf in one ear, and then due to something that happens in the book, he becomes deaf in both ears. And his story is told through the words, and it's set in the 70s. And then we're also following a little girl called Rose, and she's also deaf, but her story is set in the 20s, and it's told through the illustrations. And then as you read the book, their stories kind of weave together. So once again, it's a reread for me. I loved it just as much the first time. I don't think this is quite as good as The Invention of Hugo Cabre, probably just because I read that one first, and it just has all of the things that I love in it. Like, there are just so many elements of that story that I love, but this one is still like an exceptionally amazing book, and I think the representation that we have in here of 2 deaf characters is really important, especially in middle grade literature. So yeah, once again, I cannot recommend it enough. I love it so much, and I wish Brian Selznick would write more books. Also, I'm not really sure what happened with the lighting, but it's looking very yellow. Moving on to the final book, which I read in December. This is another one that I have talked so much about on my channel, so I'm just going to go over it really quickly, and that is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott. I assume most people are familiar with what this book is about, so I'm not going to give you a synopsis, but I loved this book. It was my first time reading it. I know I'm like one of the last people on the planet to read this book. So many people read it in school, but this was never something that I had to read, and I didn't really ever have any interest in reading it when I got older, because these are not the typical kinds of stories that I would ever pick up. It's very much almost like slice of life kind of story, and it's a very like sweet story, if you know what I mean. So I never wanted to pick it up until I watched the Greta Gerwig version of the film, and I just fell in love with the characters and the story in that movie, and then reading the book, it was no difference. I absolutely love the characters, and like I said, it's not the kind of story I would ever read, but I think it really comes down to the way that Louisa May Alcott wrote these characters that just makes you love them so much, and you don't care about spending like all of the mundane moments with them, because that's just how well written and how much you love the characters, or at least how much I love them. Yeah, I could just go on and on about this book for absolutely hours, which I've already done on my channel so many times, but 5 out of 5 star reads, would totally recommend it. I think this was the month that I had the most 5-star reads. Then again, some of them were rereads, but I just absolutely loved a lot of the books that I read this month, besides the first one. and my lack of poetry knowledge. But yeah, December was actually a pretty decent reading month, and I was really happy with ending the year on a very good note. So yeah, those are all of the books that I read in December. If you read any of these books, leave me a comment down below. I'd love to discuss them with you. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!